The chains were ice cold, so cold that Lena lost feeling in her wrists before the elder even began to speak. The smell of wet stone, damp fur, and a measure of contemptuous alpha superiority filled the crypt of Nightcliff. Hundreds of eyes burned into her exposed spine, trembling beneath the thin linen shift. Lena, Omega of the deceased Beta Rudel of the Eastern Forests. You stand before the Council of Nightcliff. Lord Hadrian's voice boomed from his stone throne. Beside him, wrapped in an aura of self-satisfied grief, stood Tristan, her ex-mate. The man whose bite still left a pale scar on her shoulder, a painful echo of a bond he himself had severed. His scent, once of sun and pine, was now sharp, poisoned by ambition. You are accused of desecrating the spirit of the Night Wolf, Hadrian continued, his fingers tracing the armrest of his throne, over engraved images of fighting wolves. You are accused of attempting, through cunning Omega machinations, to interrupt the line of pure Alpha rule. Tristan, your former mate, has testified to your guilt. A murmur went through the assembled Betas and subordinate Alphas. Lena wanted to lift her head, wanted to scream that it was a lie, that Tristan wanted to be rid of her because he was entering an alliance with a more powerful Alpha's daughter from the south. But the command scent of an overwhelmingly dominant Alpha present pressed her down. It was an invisible weight on her chest, in crushing her lungs. She dared to lift her eyes and met the gaze of Darius. He stood at the right side of the throne, the designated successor to Lord Hadrian. His hair as dark as midnight over the cliffs, his shoulders broad enough to bear the weight of an empire. His gaze was carved from stone, unshakable, empty. He looked at her, saw her naked vulnerability, her pleading eyes, and he looked away. His loyalty belonged to order, to the throne, to his future title, not to an accused Omega.
What do you say to these accusations?
Hadrian asked. The words stuck in Lena's throat, choked by the biological submission that every Alpha in this room radiated toward her. She could only shake her head. A tiny, desperate movement. Silence will be taken as an admission of guilt, declared the sharp voice of Lady Isolde, the scheming mother-in-law. She stepped from the shadows behind the throne, her narrow face a mask of false concern. The ritual of rejection must be performed to cleanse the pack. So this was it. Not just exile, the ritual of rejection. They would formally sever the pack bonds that were hers by birth. They would biologically isolate her, making her more vulnerable than ever before. A wolf without a pack was prey. Tristan stepped forward. In his hands he held a rough black cord. For the pack, he said with feigned solemnity, his eyes glittering with a victory only she could see. He tied the cord roughly around her left upper arm, over the place where his bite once sat. Then he pulled it tight. The pain was sharp, symbolic, a cut that went deeper than skin. As he stepped back, Darius took half a step forward. Lena's heart made a hopeful leap, a blind, foolish instinct. Perhaps. His voice was a cold, clear edict that cut through the hall. The judgment is made. Lena of the Eastern Forests, former Omega of the Nightcliff Pack, is rejected. Your right to pack protection, to resources, to companionship is gone. You will be taken to the Western Caves, where you will contemplate your sins until the appearance of the next full moon. Then the final judgment will be pronounced. The Western Caves. A damp, dark prison in the storm-beaten cliff where disobedient Omegas were sent to repent. Some came back changed, quiet and broken. Some didn't come back at all. The guards, two stocky Betas with indifferent faces, grabbed her by her chain-laden arms. As they dragged her from the hall, over the cold stone floor, she looked at Darius one last time. He stared straight ahead at the coat of arms above the throne. His profile was hard as granite. He had chosen the stability of his future realm over truth, over her. In that second, something broke in Lena. Not tears, something deeper. Something that turned inside her, cold and dark and old. Something that no longer felt humiliation, only a glowing, mute nothingness. The days in the western caves merged into a single, endless torment of cold, darkness, and isolation. The only light came from a small barred opening high above, through which the icy sea wind whistled. Her meals, watery soup and hard bread, were pushed wordlessly through a flap. The cold crept into her bones, making her tremble ceaselessly. Her biological clock, her omega cycle, was a confused, anxious throbbing in her abdomen, suppressed by stress and deprivation. And she slept in short, nightmare-plagued bursts. Again and again she saw Tristan's triumphant grin, Darius's turned-away profile, Lady Isolde's cold eyes. The silence was the worst, such complete silence that she began to hear voices. Whispering, growling, a voice that wasn't her own. Too weak, too quiet. They take everything from you. She pressed her hands against her ears. Madness. It was only madness, brought on by loneliness. One night, when a particularly violent storm thundered against the cliffs, a sound woke her. Not the wind, a scratching. Then a soft, sad whimper directly outside her cell door. Cautiously, she crawled over. Through the lower gap in the door, she smelled blood. Faint but distinct, and beneath the blood, the fading sweet scent of an old omega. Who's there?" she whispered. A trembling old woman's voice answered, "They left me here once too, child, until I promised never to speak again." It was the widow of the previous alpha, whom people in the pack murmured about. She was said to be eccentric and lived withdrawn in the lower chambers. "Why are you here?" "To give you what they took from me." A small, flat object was pushed under the door, an old yellowed claw attached to a leather strap. "It belongs to the crown of wolf teeth. It's not just a symbol. It's a key. And the prophecy, it has a dark claws." Lena took the claw. It felt surprisingly warm in her ice-cold hand. What prophecy? That the true ruler of Nightcliff will be crowned not by birth, but by the blessing of the Nightwolf spirit. That the spirit will awaken in the one who loses everything and yet does not break. The widow's voice became even quieter. But the Dark Claws states, the spirit demands a sacrifice of purity. Whoever receives it must first have their own blood shed. Innocent blood. A shudder ran down Lena's spine. My blood? The blood they take now. Your dignity, your bond, your future. They think they're weakening you. They don't know they're preparing you for him. A coughing fit shook the old woman. Beware the mother-in-law. She fears the prophecy more than anything. And the Alpha, he's not evil, just proud. And pride makes one blind. Before Lena could ask more, she heard hasty footsteps, and the old woman was gone. She clutched the claw, the first sign of something that wasn't complete hopelessness. A thread in the darkness. The next day brought no relief, but another level of hell. The door opened, and Lady Isolde entered, accompanied by a midwife and the piercing smell of sharp herbs. "It's time to check your condition," Isolde said coolly. "An impure omega cannot lead a healthy pack. We must ensure that your biology has not been corrupted by your deeds." It was a humiliating, invasive examination, performed with cold, efficient hardness. Lena bit her lip until it bled to keep from making a sound. She would not give them the satisfaction. When the midwife nodded, Isolde's eyes glittered. "Your cycle approaches. The heat is coming. In your isolation, without an alpha, this could be dangerous. It could drive you mad. A devious smile played around her lips. Another proof of your unworthiness. After they left, Lena cowered, trembling in a corner. The fear was now physical, tangible. An approaching heat in this cell, alone, cut off from her pack. It was a torture that could hardly be surpassed in cruelty. The voice in her head grew louder. They want to break you. They want you to whimper for mercy. Show them. Show them your teeth. The full moon came. She was led back to the crypt, still in chains, but now also fitted with a soft leather muzzle, for her own safety, and that of the pack. The hall was even fuller than last time. The air was thick with anticipation and bloodthirsty curiosity. Lord Hadrian sat enthroned above. Beside him stood Darius, now dressed in darker, more regal robes. Tristan grinned from his place among the noble alphas. Isolde sat with the posture of a queen. "Lena," Hadrian began, "the time of contemplation is over. Show remorse." "Would you acknowledge your sins?" Lena lifted her head. The muzzle hindered her speech, but her eyes could speak. She looked at Darius, and this time she held his gaze. She projected all her pain, all her innocence, all her silent accusation into that one look. She saw his jaw tense. She saw a tiny twitch around his eyes, a first barely visible crack in his stone facade. "Your silence speaks volumes," Isolde said quickly. "What, the prophecy of the pure ruler must not be tainted by a corrupted Omega. I petition for final exile beyond the Black Rocks, where no pack rules." A murmur of horror went through the crowd. Exile beyond the Black Rocks was a death sentence, slow and lonely. Darius didn't flinch. He said nothing. Exactly, Lena thought, and the cold something in her grew, filling the emptiness that hope had left behind. He watches as always. Hadrian nodded slowly. "It is a harsh judgment, but the pack must be protected. So shall it. Father." One quiet voice cut through the hall. All heads whipped around to Darius. He had spoken. His face was pale, but his eyes were now awake, fixed on Lena, on the defiant, broken brilliance in her eyes that hadn't been extinguished by anything they'd done to her. "There is a matter that must be clarified," Darius said. His voice grew firmer. "A witness has come forward. A witness who testifies that, on the evening before the alleged desecration of the sanctuary, Tristan was seen with a foreign alpha's scent trail in the eastern forests." Tumult broke out. Tristan jumped up. "Lies!" "The witness is the widow of your own father, Hadrian," Darius continued, and now his voice sounded like steel. "She has no reason to lie, and she has proof." He turned to Lena. "She says she gave you something. A claw." Isolde's breath audibly caught. In her eyes narrowed to slits. Lena, whose hands were bound behind her back, couldn't point to it. But Darius knew. He saw it in her eyes. He stepped down from the throne platform, slowly. Every eye in the room followed him. The authority radiating from him was no longer cold, but focused, dangerous. He walked directly to Lena, ignoring the guards. Then he bent forward, not to her, but to the bonds at her wrists. With a sharp jerk of a hidden dagger, he cut through the ropes. The crowd froze. A future alpha freeing a condemned omega before the judgment was pronounced. It was unprecedented. "Show them," he said quietly, meant only for her. In his eyes was no longer emptiness, but a stormy, pain-filled struggle. With trembling, numb fingers, Lena reached under her tattered clothes and pulled out the claw on its leather strap. She held it high. The moonlight falling through the high windows seemed to strike the yellowish, translucent material and make it pulse faintly from within. A soft, collective gasp went through the hall. "That's a claw of the Alpha," an old elder cried. "It belongs to the crown of wolf teeth. Only a true member of the bloodline, or one guided by the spirit, can carry it without being burned." "But she carries it," someone called. Isolde jumped up. "That proves nothing. She could have stolen it." "The prophecy is clear. The spirit will awaken in an Alpha, not in an Omega." At that moment, Lena's gaze met Tristan's again, and she saw it. The naked, undisguised panic in his eyes. She saw his betrayal, his complete plot to get rid of her while securing his own political rise. All the pain, the cold, the humiliation. It seethed in her, mixing with the cold, dark presence that had grown within her. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was thunder in her blood. "He lies." Her voice came not as a scream. It came as a deep, vibration-rich growl that seemed to vibrate through the stone floor. A voice that wasn't quite her own. The eyes of everyone in the room widened in horror. No saliva came from Melina's mouth corners, but her eyes didn't reflect the moonlight. They seemed to be deep, starless abysses. The spirit of the night wolf. It wasn't just a legend. It was in her. It had awakened. Chaos broke loose. What alphas growled instinctively, retreating. Betas backed away in fear. Tristan took a step toward her, his face contorted with rage and fear. "Witch! You corrupted—" Darius moved faster than anyone. He stepped between Tristan and Lena. His own growl was a physical blow that made Tristan stumble. "You don't touch her!" It wasn't a prince's command. It was an alpha's declaration protecting his true Omega. Too late, far too late, but finally there. The truth unfolded afterward like a bloody sunrise. Under the overwhelming evidence of the claw, under the supernatural spectacle of Lena's voice, and under Darius's now unwavering interrogation, the widow was brought forward. More evidence was retrieved from Tristan's quarters. The edifice of lies crumbled. Tristan finally confessed to staging the desecration under the guidance of Isolde, who wanted to prevent at any cost the prophecy, which named an Omega as a possible bearer of the spirit, from ever becoming reality. She had known the dark claws, and believed Lena's public suffering and exile would qualify her as an innocent sacrifice, thus appeasing or binding the spirit forever. She hadn't understood that the sacrifice wasn't death, but transformation. Sometimes I wonder how much betrayal a heart can endure before it can no longer heal, but only harden into something new, is stronger. Is that still forgiveness? Or just survival in another form? Justice was pronounced in the same throne hall that had witnessed her deepest humiliation. But this time, Lena didn't sit on the cold floor. She stood, still in tattered clothes, but with her head held high, beside Darius. Lord Hadrian, aged overnight, proclaimed the judgment. Tristan was stripped of his titles and rights and banished to the northern mines. A hard life, but not a death sentence. Isolde was sent to eternal seclusion in the eastern towers, cut off from the world and its intrigues. Then Hadrian turned to Darius. "My son, you saw the truth, but only after innocent blood was shed. Your pride clouded your judgment. The throne demands more than strength. It demands wisdom that sees faster than the eyes. Are you ready to lead?" Darius didn't look at the throne. He looked at Lena. Then, before the entire pack, he knelt, not before his father, but before her. His proud shoulders bent. "I have no right to ask for anything," he said, his voice rough. "I failed when it mattered. I abandoned you. The throne, it doesn't belong to me. Not like this." He lifted his gaze. The prophecy spoke of the blessing of the spirit. It awakened in her. She lost everything and didn't break. She sacrificed the innocent blood, her own innocence, her dignity. If there's a ruler for Nightcliff that the spirit chooses, it's her. The hall was deathly silent. Then the old elder who had spoken before raised his trembling voice. "The law. It allows, when the spirit speaks, and Lena felt it. The cold, dark presence in her calmed, becoming not gentle, but purposeful. She stepped forward, placed her hand, the hand that still bore the marks of the chains, on Darius's head. It wasn't a tender gesture. It was an acceptance, an acknowledgement of his humiliation. His shoulder twitched under her touch. "A pack needs more than one ruler," she said, and her voice was now her own, but underlined with an icy, irrefutable authority. "It needs balance. The spirit awakens, but it doesn't want a lonely throne." It wasn't complete forgiveness. It couldn't be yet. Too much had happened, but it was the beginning of a new order. Darius would ascend the throne, but not as absolute ruler. Lena, as bearer of the Nightwolf spirit, would stand at his side, not as subordinate Luna, but as guardian, as living link to the ancient power of the cliffs. The crown of wolf teeth, when it was later assembled, fit neither of them alone. But it rested between them on a cushion, a symbol of the fragile, newly forged alliance. As they left the hall, the eyes of the crowd, now a mixture of awe and fear, weighing on them, Lena paused for a moment on the threshold. The wind from the storm-beaten cliffs brushed her face. It no longer smelled of captivity. It smelled of sharp salt and boundless sky. Darius stopped beside her. "I can never make it right," he said quietly. "No," she said simply. It was the truth. But when his hand hesitantly approached hers, she didn't pull away. The wound was still fresh, the mistrust deep. The path back to each other, if there ever would be one, would be long and paved with the shards of their broken dreams. But in the cold, clear air of Nightcliff, with the echo of an ancient spirit in her blood, she felt something other than despair. She felt the rough, relentless texture of her own strength, and that, she knew, no one could take from her anymore. This story ends here, on the threshold between old humiliation and uncertain future. Some scars never fade. They only become part of the landscape through which we wander. If you're ready to walk more of these rough, thorny paths, then return. More stories wait in the darkness, ready to be told.